Coming up, another episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas. A podcast produced by Bob Rash.
That delivers a logical analysis of objective reality, grounded in rational principles. We will explore relevant facts and radical ideas based on the axiomatic principles of identity, causality, and consciousness, on reason as an absolute, on rational self-interest as a moral guide, and on the ideals of privacy, freedom, and justice.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are jumping straight into some really fascinating source material that you shared with us.
Yeah, it tackles a pretty big idea, doesn't it? Human irrationality.
Right, and this concept of original sin. But, well, not in the way you might usually hear it. It's looking at it through a different lens entirely.
A psychoepistemological one, which basically means looking at how we know things, how we learn, and how that whole process can sometimes go wrong.
Exactly, and how it connects to why we act in ways that honestly don't seem rational sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission here for this deep dive is to really unpack these sources you sent, see what they say about why people might act against their own judgment or, their own self-interest.
And the core idea, the one the source puts right out front, it's pretty striking.
It really is. It says the root cause isn't something external or some flaw we inherit. It's internal, a failure.
Specifically, the failure or refusal to think. The active evasion of reality. That's what this view frames as the fundamental dysfunction.
The psychoepistemological original sin, as they put it. Not religious, but about how our minds work or fail to work.
Yes, that's the claim. That this evasion is where irrationality really begins.
Okay, that's definitely a powerful place to start. So let's dig into that. This idea of evasion.
Yeah.
What is it, according to the source? Why would someone do it? And, how does this idea compare to other ways people have thought about sin and knowledge and reason through history?
Great. So starting with that core idea, the source is pretty clear. Irrational behavior isn't random. It stems directly from this internal failure, this refusal to think.
Which they define as the evasion of reality.
Exactly.
And it's crucial, isn't it, that this isn't just about, say, making an honest mistake or not knowing something yet.
No, it's framed as an active choice. A voluntary act, the source says, of closing one's eyes to facts.
Intellectual dishonesty, but aimed at yourself.
Precisely. And that specific act, that inward dishonesty, is what this perspective labels the original sin in this context. The root of the problem.
Okay, which naturally leads to the next question. Why? I mean, why would a thinking person choose that? Choose to ignore facts?
Why evade reality when, facing it seems like the only truly rational path?
Exactly. And this is where the source brings in cognitive dissonance.
That's presented as the key mechanism. Cognitive dissonance. It's that really uncomfortable, sometimes painful feeling you get when your beliefs clash with reality.
Especially beliefs that are, central to who you think you are, your values, your identity.
Right, when those core subjective beliefs run smack into objective facts that contradict them.
That clash, it creates this internal conflict. Anxiety, maybe guilt, insecurity, just a real sense of psychological discomfort.
Definitely. And evasion in this framework is seen as a defense mechanism against that specific pain.
Ah, okay. So you close your eyes to the facts to avoid the pain of seeing your cherished belief crumble.
Essentially, yes. It's an attempt, maybe unconscious sometimes, maybe not, to protect a self-image or a worldview that's built on, well, shaky or false foundations, when reality challenges those foundations.
Evasion feels easier, at least in the moment, than dealing with the dissonance.
In the short term, yeah. But the source argues it's ultimately destructive, and it goes deeper.
Deeper than just the immediate pain of dissonance.
Yes. It suggests that the tendency to react with painful dissonance and then resort to evasion, that tendency itself stems from something more fundamental.
Which is?
A lack of what the source calls rational self-esteem.
Okay, rational self-esteem. That sounds important. What does the source mean by that? It's not just feeling good about yourself, is it?
No, it's more specific. It's about fundamentally valuing yourself as a thinking being, as someone competent to deal with reality.
Competent, meaning you trust your own mind.
Yes, and understanding that being human means being fallible. We will make mistakes. Our knowledge won't be perfect. Rational self-esteem isn't about thinking you're infallible.
It's about knowing you can handle being fallible, knowing you can spot and correct your own errors.
Exactly that. It's the conviction that you can correct cognitive mistakes. So if you have this rational self-esteem...
You don't crumble when you find out you were wrong about something.
Right. An error isn't seen as proof of your inherent inadequacy. It's just information. A signal that your understanding needs an update and adjustment.
So someone with this kind of self-esteem wouldn't fear reality, even if it's uncomfortable or contradicts what they thought.
That's the idea. They don't fear errors because they trust their capacity to identify them and fix them. The real problem, from this perspective, isn't making the mistake.
It's the refusal to acknowledge it, the evasion.
Yes, and that refusal is fueled by the lack of rational self-esteem, that underlying fear of facing reality, perhaps because you fear what it might reveal about your past judgments or beliefs.
And this ties back to free will, doesn't it? The source mentions choice.
It does. It emphasizes that we have the capacity, the free will, to choose to focus, to use our senses and our logic to understand reality, to essentially reprogram our view when it's shown to be wrong.
But if you lack that rational self-esteem,
that choice becomes incredibly hard. Evasion then seems like the safer option, the only way to avoid the pain of dissonance, even though it ultimately traps you.
Okay, so let me try to piece this cycle together from what you're saying about the sources.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a lack of rational self-esteem makes you sort of fragile, afraid of being wrong.
Yeah, vulnerable to that dissonance.
So maybe you build up beliefs, even an identity, on shaky ground to feel secure. But then reality hits. Facts contradict those beliefs.
Creating that painful cognitive dissonance.
And to escape that pain, you choose to evade. You ignore or rationalize away the facts.
Right.
But that evasion stops you from fixing the wrong beliefs.
Yeah.
It keeps the shaky foundation in place. And ironically, by not using your mind honestly, you undermine your own sense of competence,
Yeah.
reinforcing the lack of rational self-esteem.
You've got it. That's the damaging loop the source describes as the core mechanism behind irrationality. A cycle driven by evasion, triggered by dissonance, rooted in low rational self-esteem.
Wow. Okay.
And the source also mentions related issues like rationalism.
Which sounds like it should be good, but here it's presented as another form of evasion.
Exactly. It's described as using logic, yes, but detaching it from reality, from observation, from the facts you get through your senses, the whole inductive process.
So like building complex logical arguments based on premises that you just made up or accepted without checking if they match the world.
Precisely. The source calls it pseudo-thinking. It might look logical, but it's not aimed at understanding reality. It's used to justify ideas that aren't grounded in facts. It's another way to avoid confronting reality directly.
Because genuine rationality, in this view, demands adherence to reality. Start with observation, form concepts based on that, then use logic to integrate it all coherently.
Yes. And it touches on the mind-body connection, too, consciousness needing to integrate perception. Errors happen, but fixing them takes that conscious will to focus, to think honestly.
Which brings us back to courage, doesn't it? The courage linked to rational self-esteem.
It all seems to tie together in this framework.
This whole perspective, it's really fascinating how it pins irrationality on this internal choice, this evasion driven by a lack of confidence in one's own mind. It's such a contrast to some, well, more traditional ideas about human failings or sin.
Absolutely. And the sources directly address that contrast, bringing in some major historical figures.
Like Augustine.
Augustine, yeah. often seen as representing that traditional Christian view of original sin.
Where the fall was, basically, wanting to know too much, eating from the tree of knowledge.
Right. The desire for knowledge itself becomes problematic. Thinking is seen as risky, potentially leading you away from faith.
So knowledge is dangerous.
In that view, yes. The source points to Augustine blending Christianity with Neoplatonism, which tended to devalue reason in favor of faith or mystical insight. Man is seen as inherently flawed, corrupt, needing redemption through faith, not reason. The desire to know is suspect.
That sets up a real tension between faith and reason.
A long-standing one. But then the sources introduce Maimonides as a stark contrast.
The great Jewish philosopher.
Indeed. For Maimonides, reason wasn't the enemy. It was God's highest gift. It was the tool for understanding the world and for knowing God.
So no inherent conflict between faith and reason for him.
He argued there wasn't or shouldn't be. He believed scripture and objective truth could be harmonized, sometimes using allegory. Rational knowledge wasn't just acceptable, it was a virtue, a form of worship.
So sin, in his view, wasn't seeking knowledge.
Sin was the rejection of reason, the voluntary refusal to use the intellect God gave you. Very different from Augustine. Big influence from Aristotle there, elevating the intellectual life.
A completely different attitude towards the mind. Okay, and then Aquinas comes into the picture.
Thomas Aquinas trying to sort of bridge that gap within Christianity.
Bringing Aristotle back into the fold.
Largely, yes. Reintroducing Aristotle's emphasis on reason. Aquinas accepted the doctrine of original sin, but he gave reason a crucial, dignified role. His famous idea was that truth cannot contradict truth.
Meaning faith and reason ultimately have to align.
They must be compatible. Reason, for Aquinas, could discover natural truths about the world, morality, even God's existence, and this prepares the mind for truths known through revelation.
So, less pessimistic than Augustine.
Definitely, according to the source, Aquinas saw humans as naturally oriented towards good, capable of using reason to guide passions. He affirmed the dignity of reason.
Okay, so after Augustine's suspicion, we see Maimonides and Aquinas strongly valuing reason, albeit within their theological frameworks. But then your sources mention Kant as, well, a turning point in the other direction.
Kant is presented as pivotal, but in a way the source used very negatively from this psychoepistemological standpoint.
18th century philosopher, what was the issue?
The core issue highlighted is Kant's distinction between the noumenal and the phenomenal world.
Things as they are versus things as they appear to us.
Right. Noumena, things in themselves, which Kant said are ultimately unknowable. Phenomena, the world as we experience it, structured by the categories of our own minds.
So the source interprets this as cutting the link between our minds and actual reality.
That's exactly the interpretation presented. That Kant effectively severed consciousness from existence, saying we can't know reality directly, only our mind's version of it.
And the consequence of that, according to this view,
the source argues it opened the door wide to subjectivism and relativism. It fundamentally poisoned reason's relationship with objective reality.
Poison how?
By turning reason inward, making it about how our minds structure experience rather than how we grasp external facts. So cognitive dissonance might no longer be a sign your belief is wrong about reality.
But just, what, a feature of how minds work? An unavoidable clash?
Potentially, yes. The source claims this ultimately fostered a culture where evasion, avoiding objective reality, could be given a kind of philosophical cover.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong claim. So, looking at that historical sweep, Augustine's suspicion of knowledge, Maimonides and Aquinas valuing reason, then Kant seen as undermining reason's connection to reality, it really frames this core idea about evasion in a much larger debate.
It really does. The source synthesizes it as this ongoing conflict between two fundamental views. Is knowledge a danger, or is it a virtue?
And the perspective in these sources, this objectivist view, clearly falls in the knowledge is virtue camp.
Firmly. But it distinguishes itself by relying solely on reason, grounded in reality, rejecting any supernatural authority or innate ideas. Everything comes from observation and logic.
Which brings us right back to where we started. From this viewpoint, humans aren't flawed for wanting to know.
Quite the opposite. They have the potential for heroism when they choose to engage their minds, to think, to face reality.
The source used that metaphor. The apple isn't sin. It's the courage to use reason.
A powerful reframing.
So let's just recap the core argument from your sources then. The root of your rationality is presented as this act of evasion, choosing not to see reality.
Driven often by the pain of cognitive dissonance.
Which arises when facts clash with beliefs, especially beliefs held defensively due to an underlying lack of rational self-esteem, that fear of being wrong rooted in not trusting your own mind's capacity.
Exactly. That's the cycle.
And we've contrasted this with Augustine's view of knowledge as dangerous, Maimonides and Aquinas seeing reason as virtuous and God-given, and Kant, who in this interpretation, unintentionally perhaps, provided a philosophical basis for detaching reason from reality.
A real spectrum of views on the mind's relationship with truth.
Understanding this cycle, evasion, dissonance, lack of rational self-esteem, it really does offer a lens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A way to think about irrational behavior, whether in history or society or even maybe closer to home.
It highlights just how critical cultivating that rational self-esteem might be, that foundational confidence in your ability to think, to learn, to face facts, even uncomfortable ones.
Because the failure isn't being wrong, it's refusing to see it.
Refusing to engage with reality, honestly, that's the evasion.
So, thinking about this, if the fundamental failure, the original sin in this psycho-epistemological sense, is that refusal to think, to embrace reality, it really makes you wonder, what does building that opposite quality, that rational self-esteem, that courage to use your reason actually look like in practice?
Yeah.
In your own life?
How might that courage, that willingness to see clearly, errors and all, change how you navigate the world, how you learn, how you face challenges?
Yeah. And reflecting on those historical views too, and which perspective on knowledge and reason resonates most with you now, having heard this particular take, is reason a gift, a danger, a tool disconnected from reality, or the key to engaging with it?
Definitely something to mull over.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive, exploring radical ideas, grounded in reality, driven by reason, built on self-esteem, rational self-interest, and laissez-faire capitalism, produced by Bob Rash.
We'll be back next week. Until then, stay curious, stay free.
The Deep Dive by Bob Rash.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.